Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second Platform YA Book Club live stream. Today, we are joined, as you can see, by the amazing author Camryn Garrett, who wrote this week's book club book, Full Disclosure. For those of you who are thinking, a book club? What book club? I just stumbled upon this stream. I had no idea there was a book club. We are running an online book club throughout the whole of August, reading a book each week for 4 weeks. I've linked the announcement video in the description, which has all the details, but basically there are 4 ways to get involved. One you've already done, which is read the book of the week and then watch the author live stream. Those are happening every Sunday on this YouTube channel. The second thing you can do is use hashtag Platform YA Book Club on social media as you read to share your thoughts, ask the authors your questions, meet fellow readers. Plus, anytime you use the hashtag, you will be entered into our weekly giveaway to win an amazing YA book bundle. We've already chosen our winner for last week, and I will be choosing the winner for this week after the stream today. Number 3, you can join our Discord community. We've left a link in the video description. You can basically connect with other YA readers. We're having some really good chats there, lots of book memes. It's been great. And then finally, if you are a book creator yourself, maybe you do TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or a blog, we would love to see any content you make around these books. So please share it with us so we can share it with everyone else. So today I'll be talking to Camryn, asking her some of my own questions, and then also you will have a chance to ask her some questions. So if you think of any questions during the stream that you haven't already posted to social media, because I've gathered all of those up, then please add it to the live chat, and my brilliant colleague Harriet will be collecting them all so that we can ask Camryn them later. So at any point during the stream, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. And I also know that some people might not have entirely finished the book. So the way that we're going to do this stream, because we don't want to give any spoilers to people who haven't quite finished, the first part of the stream is going to be reasonably spoiler free, so you can watch it even if you haven't started reading the book yet. And then the last section will be switching to spoiler filled questions. And don't worry, I will let everyone know when the spoiler section starts so you won't be caught off guard. And then once you finish the book, you can come back and watch that end section, which will deal with book endings, twists, anything like that we might find in the book. That's where that will be. So without further ado, I'm going to get to the questions. And the first question I think I'm actually going to ask is not from me, it's from someone on the Discord called Sunny, who asks, how did you write this when you were so young? Question mark, exclamation mark. I mean, you wrote this when you were a teenager, right? And it was published when you were a teenager as well.
Yeah, I wrote it when I was 16, I think, and then we sold it right before I turned 18. It was actually easier in high school than it was now. And I think it's because in high school I didn't do anything and all I did was write, and school ended around 2 p.m., which left a lot of time to write all day. And that's just what I did. It sounds really boring and kind of sad, but it was a lot of fun and I enjoyed it a lot.
Amazing. So how did you start writing? Were you a kid who wrote all the time when you were younger, or was it something that you came to when you were a teenager?
No, I wrote a lot when I was younger. I don't know if you know the movie The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, but I wrote like a fan sequel in like a little composition notebook, and I drew like, it was like comic panels. I don't remember what happened. But yeah, like I wrote fan fiction, and I wrote like stories for school newspapers and like literary journals, and I was always really into it. And then I did Time magazine has like a magazine for children, and I was a student reporter for that. And after that, I was like, wow, I'm a serious writer. I should write a novel. And that's what I did.
So did you sort of decide to write a novel and then come across the kind of inspiration for Full Disclosure, or did the inspiration come first and then you thought, actually, this could be a thing I could write about? How did that work for you?
I'd written novels before Full Disclosure, and I actually wanted to quit like writing when I came to Full Disclosure. But yeah, I had the idea sort of lingering around for a while because I was super interested in adoption. And I used to read adoption blogs, which I know sounds really weird, but a lot of parents would adopt kids with special needs, like from international countries. And one big need was HIV. And at the time, I didn't really know a lot about it. And then it was sort of like this niche area of the internet that I was super into. And then I decided to do something for National Novel Writing Month. I was like, I'm going to write about something that's super interesting to me. And it became Full Disclosure.
Amazing. So for those of you who might not know, National Novel Writing Month, or NaNoWriMo, or Remo, depending on how you pronounce it, is like a sort of international thing. It's a month where people basically try and write 50,000 words in the 30 days of November. So did you reach 50,000 during that November, or did it just get you kickstarted and then you kept going afterwards?
I reached 50,000. That's what I said like earlier, like it was so much easier to write in high school than it is now. I wrote 50,000 and I was like, this is it, this is amazing. And obviously it was really bad and it had to be edited like a million times.
Well, that's interesting then. So we have a question from Always Smiling that was also from the Discord. They wanted to know, what was your process while writing this novel? So I guess part of it was NaNoWriMo, but then you also were writing afterwards. I guess you were redrafting. Like, what was that process of writing like for you?
Yeah, I worked for a long time, for at least like 3 months, editing with my agent. And then once the book sold, I edited with my editor. But definitely, I think the hardest part of the process was trying to craft the mystery element of the book, which I won't say too much about because spoilers, but
we'll talk about that in the spoiler section.
Yeah. I liked writing the romance parts and not so much the plot parts.
How long did it take to write in all then, from when you first started? Like, how long was it before you sent it to an agent? And then after that, how long before you actually like had a book in your hands? Do you remember?
I want to say like a year and a few months, because I know I wrote it, the first draft, in a month, and then I edited it on my own for a month, and then 3 more months with my agent. So this is so much math. And then more months with my editor. So I really want to say it was like a year and 2 months. That's a good estimate.
Nice, pretty long time to spend with these characters.
Yeah.
Did anything big change then from that first draft that you were writing? Was it pretty seamless all the way through, or did you have, it's not a spoiler to say that the plot of the book, the summary on the back of the book says there's a note gets left for the main character, Simone, essentially kind of a blackmail note saying, break up with this boy or I will tell everyone they are HIV positive. Was that kind of element to it always there, for example? Was it always going to be the same person who'd written the note? Were there any big changes from that first draft, or did it stay pretty much the same and it was just changing words here and there and scene order and stuff like that?
It changed a lot. The same concept was always there, that there was like a blackmail note and it was always the same person. But the more we edited, the more it was like, there should be a red herring here. It's too easy to tell who it is. Let's make it harder. In the first draft, Miles was white, and then I made him black because I was like, as of right now, he has no personality and I don't know how to give him a personality. So I'm going to make him black, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, but it made sense to me. And I'm trying to think of what else. There was also just less sex, if you can believe it. There was a lot more sex added over time. And there's a sex shop scene that's my favorite that got added during revisions.
I really love that scene. That was great. We also, on the Discord, we've kind of been chatting about scenes we liked, and I think everyone was a really, really big fan of the fact that you're writing a YA that's sex positive, but also, talks about different kinds of sex, different, both in terms of the health element of it and that kind of clinical, more doctor side of things, the gynecology side of things, and then also like best friends talking to each other, gossiping, going to a sex shop, all this kind of stuff that's not unheard of for teenagers to do. It's as realistic as the kind of clean teen YA as it's sometimes, which is much more kind of for younger audiences. I think that you've really hit on something that a lot of people have really resonated with that topic. Can you talk about your decision to write in the first person, right? So you've got someone as a narrator. Was there ever a point in which you thought you might write third person or have other points of view in there, or was her voice always super strong for you?
It was always Simone. She was always the strongest voice to me and who I could picture talking to. I used to do this thing where I'd write a first draft in one tense and then revise it and rewrite it in another, but it was so much work that I stopped. And I just like first person because I really get into the head of whatever character is the main character. So I really wanted to focus on Simone because I love her, and that's why I was first person.
And she is great, to be fair.
She's the best, yes.
I have actually quite a long question from Lily Ventris, who is someone else on the Discord. It's like a comment and a question in one, which we love. This is kind of I guess there's a few questions now about writing advice, because I think that our audience, there are a lot of people who are really into writing themselves, get really inspired by the books that they read, stuff like that. So I thought I'd ask you a little bit about that, see if you had any advice. So Lily's question is, I know you wrote the book at 17. Love the fact that you wrote Full Disclosure as a teenager, because it's one of the few YA books I've read that got the tone for teenagers perfect. And I was wondering whether you found writing Off the Record, your next book, harder now that you're older, or found that you couldn't get into the mind of a teenager as easily now that you're an adult. However, if you're finding it easy, then do you have any tips for aspiring YA novelists on how to accurately write like a teenager, even if they're an adult themselves?
Okay, so firstly, I wrote the first draft of Off the Record like literally like 2 months after I sold Full Disclosure. So I was still 18, 17, still in high school, which I think helped a lot with the tone. But it's interesting to go back and edit it, because obviously I was in college and I was older when I was editing it, and to see sort of the different things that I used. So I think it's true that as you get older, you sort of become more removed from the tone and the dialogue of actual teens, but I don't think you have to get it exactly correct. Like, you don't have to know all the slang, and you don't have to know all the memes and the TikTok stuff, which I'm really bad with. But if you have the general like tone and the general idea of what it feels like to be young, especially in certain situations, I think that really comes across. Like, most of us who love YA, you're reading books by adults. Yeah. And they probably don't know what TikTok dances are, and they probably don't know memes, and they probably don't know a bunch of stuff, but they were teenagers once, and there's still the general angst and the crushes and all that cool stuff. So I'd really tap into that.
Do you think as you're older, you'll continue to write YA stuff? Is that kind of where your head's at? Or do you think that as you get older, you'll end up writing more adult stuff? Or are you kind of like, we'll see, who knows?
I kind of feel like we'll see. This sounds so weird. Whenever I have like an adult idea, I usually write it as a screenplay. I really love YA though, and I feel like writing it is not necessarily easy, but comfortable and familiar in a way that adult isn't.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I also wanted to ask, kind of following on from that, if you do have characters, because it's obviously going to be characters in your books that you're writing about who are different to you. So even though you're not necessarily writing from their point of view like you are with Simone, there are other characters you need to include, and you need to have, you know, realistic motivations for what they're doing, things like that. Do you find it quite easy to put yourself into the shoes of people who are different, or is that more of a struggle and you have to kind of really work at figuring out motivations and all that kind of stuff?
I think it's generally easier for me just because you spend so much time writing the book that even if in the first draft, like especially with an antagonist, I think in the first draft, they might be two-dimensional and evil and like evil laughter. But the more time you spend with the book, the more you understand them and how they work in the world. And I also just spent a lot of time thinking about the characters. So it's not necessarily hard for me, but I feel like there is effort required.
How similar or different are you to Simone? Do you see any of yourself in her, or is she totally different to you?
It's sort of in between. I took some aspects of myself and like amped it up. I used to be really into musical theater, I think when I was 15 or 14. And I feel like now if I met Simone, she would kind of yell at me for my lack of musical theater knowledge. She would just judge me the whole way through. And I think she's more confident than I was, at least in high school, just about sex. I used to talk to my friends about things, but I never would have, gone to a doctor's appointment with my parents, or I wouldn't bring up certain discussions around people. I just wouldn't have done any of that.
We've got another question from someone else, from Joanna. Again, I'll point out if anyone else has joined us since we started, if you have any questions for Camryn about writing, about the book, about what she's doing next, about like absolutely anything, put them in the chat of this stream, and my colleague Harriet will be collecting any that get dumped in there, and we will answer them as we get to them. So yeah, Joanna asks, from the acknowledgements, it seems you've written lots of different draft novels and shared these. Can I ask about your process for writing and sharing longer pieces of work, both with friends and the publishing industry? Are there any pieces of past work that you would like to return to or possibly publish?
I wrote this one novel when I was, it was whenever the first Star Wars in the reboot came out, because I had a big crush on Kylo Ren, and the love interest is heavily inspired by him, which tells you a lot about where I was in this point in time. And I've revised it so many times, and I don't really think it's going to work, but I keep trying because I love the characters a lot. That being said, I usually don't share anything with anyone unless I've written the full draft all the way through and I've revised it and made it legible and I'm not ashamed of it. And then I'll share it with my agent. I will sometimes share it with other writers that I know, depending on the topic. So for example, Nick Stone read one of my earlier books. And it was really helpful because it was about police brutality and Blackness and all sorts of different intersections of that. And she gave really good notes. Of course, the book didn't really go anywhere, but I think there are specific people you go to for specific notes and feedback that you want.
Is there a reason why you don't send stuff to people before you've got it kind of fully formed? Is it just because you're nervous to send people stuff that you aren't like happy with? Or do you not want people's input until you've figured out everything? What's that kind of thought process for you?
I'm kind of like superstitious, and I keep having this discussion with my friend where I don't even really like sharing ideas before I've at least written like at least 50,000 words, just because in the past, when I do share an idea before it's fully formed, it usually falls apart. And my friends like, just break the curse, whatever that means. But I just really am superstitious and sort of protective about it. And then once it's become something, I feel like it's more on solid ground. And whereas in the early stages, if someone's like, oh, are you sure about this aspect? I'm like, you're right. I should just trap it.
It's terrible. You're totally correct.
Exactly.
I want to talk now a little bit about the sort of the content of the book. So we've had a few different questions around that. I kind of want to know, this is actually the same question I asked Karen last week about One of Us is Lying, because I think both of you have books which deal with what could be seen as like issues or like hot topics, but neither of them feel didactic or preachy in any way, so which I think is a really great mix, especially for young people. Was that intentional? Did you intend to have that kind of element of sort of topic commentary, stuff like that in it, or was it just kind of an accident where you decided what to write about and it's like, well, obviously if you're writing about people's lives, these social issues are going to come in because that's how people live their lives, it's kind of unavoidable? What was that balance like for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it fell in as I was writing. And then when we went through each draft and revised more, I fleshed it out and like made it stronger because I thought it was important to have different aspects, like discussions of sexuality. Sex was the big one, but different family types, like different dynamics between families. I thought it just made sense because these are the things that my friends were dealing with and that I were dealing with. It just came really naturally.
Makes sense. Do you ever, when you're writing, have an idea of like what you hope readers will gain, if they'll like get something from the novel or gain something from the novel? Do you ever have that in your mind, or is it kind of quite the readers will get what they get from it? I've just decided to write something and I'll just hand it over to them for their own reactions.
With full disclosure, I just kind of wrote it for me, and I was like, they'll get what they get. But with later books, it's a little harder to do that. And I definitely think, like, what are readers going to think? That's what makes writing harder now.
I think I'm going to follow up with a few questions that we've had in. 20-something asks, what made you include such a variety of sexualities in your book? Was it a conscious decision or did it happen organically as you fleshed out each character? So,
I definitely think it's a little bit of both, where I based, especially the friend group of Claudia, Lydia, and Simone on my own friend group in high school. And at the time, I had a friend who identified as asexual, and I had friends who were bi, and some of us were not really sure what was happening. But another part of it was also seeing like asexual book bloggers and writers talk on Twitter about harmful tropes that they've seen about asexual people. And I thought there's one phrase that kept coming up, which is like sex is perfectly natural and sex is normal and wanting sex is normal. And this is a thing that everyone has. And people would say, well, that's not necessarily true because I'm ace and I don't feel that way. So I really tried to make sure that as I was talking about Simone wanting to have sex and her friends talking to her about that, I wanted to show that that's not necessarily the truth for everyone. And I didn't want to single out readers or characters who don't feel the same way and don't have the same experience.
I really love that. I really, really love that friendship group. I think what was so interesting is we often see kind of gay or queer novels as being like, and the one gay character, especially I think with YA books, there are a lot of amazing like queer YA, but I think in the mainstream wise, a lot of people think of it as being all of the other characters are straight, and then we have one gay boy who has to come out, and that's his journey, and then maybe there might be a hint at a relationship somewhere in there. And so it was really refreshing, I think, to have this storyline in which you had a group of teen friends who all of them had some like the queerness in there, and some really knew exactly how they identified and was super kind of confident about it. And then you've got Simone, who's a little bit like, I'm figuring it out, you guys, like I'll make that work at some point, but I got other stuff to worry about right now. So I think it was a really, really refreshing thing to read, especially because, like you said, I think a lot of young queer people have their friendship groups where everyone turns out queer. Like it's just like, how do we all find each other? Where did this come from?
Yeah.
And so that made a lot of sense to me, and it's something that I haven't seen so much of in a lot of YA. So that was really, I really love that. Following on from that, we have a kind of linked question from Levi, who asked, hi, just finished up the book. I was wondering what inspired you to include an asexual character. I was honestly so surprised. I identify as asexual myself and thought you portrayed her sexuality really well. Most writers forget or don't know aesthetic attraction or sexual attraction are different things, and you actually didn't have her be aromantic too. How did you do the research for her character? Even I had trouble when I was still figuring out if I was asexual or not, so it's really nice to see someone putting in the effort to portray it accurately.
It makes me so happy that Levi thought this was good, Rob. I'm so happy. So I originally started with reading articles about it. And then at the time, one of my friends from high school was asexual. And so I talked to her a lot about how she felt because she had a girlfriend and they would kiss and they were all lovey and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, how does this work? Tell me what this is like for you. And I spoke to her about it. And then I had readers who read the book and would say, like, this seems realistic to me, this doesn't seem realistic. And that really shaped the asexuality of Claudia.
Amazing. Is that kind of how you generally do research? Is it seeking out people who, for example, if you're doing the research for Simone and being HIV positive, what kind of stuff are you doing to make sure you're doing that accurately? Is it the same for different identities or different experiences? Is it different depending on what those different ones are? How's that process for you?
Yeah, I think with Simone, I think there was a lot of time spent on the science aspect of HIV and the medication and what a viral load is and all of that stuff so that the reader would also be informed. And then there was the history of HIV and how it affected queer communities and who was left out and who lost their lives, because that influenced the stigma and also how our parents view it. And then just what it was like living day to day. So there are magazines for HIV positive people like Pause, and I would read a lot of those because people wrote firsthand accounts, and a lot of the articles are written by people who have HIV. And then I did talk to specific people, and they did read the book and tell me this doesn't seem realistic or this does. So it was sort of a similar process, but I think with Simone, there was a lot of research into the past and wanting to see how that connected with the present day.
And I think that's something to be said for if anyone is watching and is kind of an aspiring writer. One of the things I think you did really well in the book is this isn't new to Simone, right? Like she's had this her entire life, so she's not going to be kind of explaining to herself what is HIV. It is this. So it was really, really well done for me, at least, the way in which you weaved okay, if we need the audience to know something, because you know that like there's a lot of teen readers who are going to come to this book and not necessarily know anything about HIV, so you don't want them to be confused, but you also don't want to make this character do something that she wouldn't do just so your audience knows what's going on. So I really felt like like her dad's talking, it's kind of mentioned that her dads had known people who had died during the AIDS crisis, and that had been part of the reason why they didn't feel kind of necessarily scared, and they were scared in some ways to have an HIV positive baby, but also they felt like it was the right thing to do, and those things linking together even unconsciously, that there were so many little elements like that were, you would imagine that if that was the situation you're in, that your parents would talk to you openly about it, and so it's something that you would know and you would mention. So I felt like that was really, really well done within the book itself, of making sure it never felt awkward that you were including this. And then also having her, you know, go to the gynecologist, go to the doctors. You had scenes where we had a medical professional telling us about her illness, but we also had her reaction to it and her emotional awkwardness about it being in the same room as her dad while it was happening, and we always felt like we were moving forwards with the character and the plot, rather than it just being a nice little info dump of like, by the way, kids, like here is what would be said in one of these doctor's appointments. So yeah, I think that was so well done. A question, I guess, that links into that, 20-something asks, do you think it's important for YA novels to talk openly about sex in a way that reflects the real teenage experience?
Yes, this is very important to me. And I don't, no, I can't say that. But I think that it's super important, especially because I wrote, partially one of the reasons why there's so much sex in this book is because when I was in high school, I was very horny and I also knew nothing about sex. And it was that combination, and also knowing that it wasn't just me. Like I'd go to lunch and I'd sit with my friends and we'd have all these questions and be like, when do condoms need to be worn? And if you have a vagina, do you need to wear a condom? Like all sorts of stuff. And it was sort of like the blind leading the blind. Like we had no idea what we were talking about. One of my friends would be like, I'll text my older sister and ask. And we would Google things and watch porn, and that's not a great way to get information. So I really wished that I had an adult or some other informed person to go to talk to. I wasn't going to talk to my mom because that's weird. And my teachers couldn't teach us anything. So I really wanted to write something where even if you're not reading it as like a guide or a how-to on how to have safe sex, I wanted it to be discussed and I wanted it to be open, because even if teens aren't having sex, if they have questions, they should be able to ask someone.
Makes total sense. I've just had a look at the chat, and Always Smiling is asking, are we answering questions from Twitter? If you have already put your question on Twitter before the stream started, I've gathered all those questions, so I'll be including them. If you want to ask a question now, do it in the chat. We already have a couple, and I'm definitely going to be coming to the questions from the chat. I can see we've had a couple in there. I'll do it in just a minute. I've got a couple more questions about this sort of content of the book first. So Edie Elliott asks, what was it that made you drawn to writing about topics that are often stigmatized?
It was really writing about what I wanted to see and what I hadn't seen before. Like a lot of the books that I had read about HIV and AIDS had been written earlier or were set earlier. So they were set in the 90s and the 80s, and there hadn't been a whole lot of technological advancement. So people were dying in droves, and it was very, very depressing, very important. And these books were great, but it was also very, very sad. And so I wanted to write something where she had HIV, but she's like, that's not my main problem. My main problem is I want to get laid. And yeah.
Last question around this, but I think kind of ties into that. Joanna asks, how did you decide on the Blackmail plot as the vehicle to explore that stigma?
I figured that I had to have some sort of plot. I'm really, really bad at plot. So at first it was kind of just like Simone hanging out and wanting to date this boy and needing to tell him that she has HIV, but there weren't really enough stakes, and it was also very slow and like just a lot of kissing and no plot, and it made no sense. And the Blackmail plot really set up the plot in a way where there's a clear beginning, middle, and end. So it was really helpful for me because I can't plot worth anything. And it also ups the stakes and also makes things more interesting. And it was very heavily inspired by Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda by Becky Albertalli. So
awesome. I think we can take a couple of questions from the live stream. So Always Smiling asks, what advice would you give to young aspiring authors?
I would say to write as much as you can and read as much as you can. And that sounds very basic, but I think it helps a ton, especially since I'm not sure who said it, but someone said that you have to write like 100,000 hours or 10,000 hours. It might have been Stephen King to get all the bad words out, and then you start writing good stuff. And I have so many novels that I've written that are horrible, but I had fun writing them, and I think they made me a better writer. So I'd say take yourself seriously if you want, and if you don't want to, just do it for fun.
I think as well, like you and Karen have both talked about the fact that you wrote stuff before the first book got published, right? Like Karen had written like 2 or 3 books before the first one was published. You had as well, and I think that's kind of the story with a lot of writers, that you need to kind of just get out there and do it. And I think that if you're worried about it being, this is my one chance, my one book, then you might get a little bit too worried about, is it perfect from the very first moment you start writing? And actually maybe it's probably better to just get everything out there first, so you can give it some practice, do some editing, think, all that kind of stuff. So good advice. And then similarly, Nikki B asks a specific advice question. What advice would you give to writers who have major plot holes in their outline, or things that are missing within the outline? You said that you find like plotting difficult, but like how did you get through that? What was advice maybe you were given about that?
I'm not the best person to ask. However, I would say try explaining the plot to someone who you've never told anything about the book to. I was doing this last night with my friend, and she was like, I'm confused. But I think it really helps because you can notice, even if they don't say anything, when they've gotten lost.
Yeah.
And it can really help. And sometimes even just a question they'll ask, like, why does he have to leave? Or why does this have to happen? Makes you be like, oh, this doesn't have to happen. Or maybe I can get rid of this. I find that really helpful.
That's a really good idea. I've also heard people say if you're kind of trying to figure out endings, or for example, like you've got a villain or a character that you're waiting to see, like a mystery that you're waiting to see what the audience will get, giving people the beginning act or the beginning half of the book and then seeing if they guess off the back of that can probably tell you, is it too obvious? Have people figured out who it is immediately? Do I need to put some more stuff in there? So yeah, I think talking to other people about it is such a great idea. We also have more of a housekeeping question about is a giveaway UK only? No, I've just decided it's not UK only. If you don't live in the UK, we will make it happen. We will get the books to you. That is totally fine. Normally our stuff is UK only for the giveaways, but for this one, why not? I get to decide that, and I've decided. We will pay for your postage and packaging. I kind of want to talk a little about inspiration, and specifically about, you talked about the idea of a good piece of advice for someone wanting to write is to read lots and to write lots. Do you have any particular authors that really inspire you, that really kind of you read their stuff and you're like, yes, let's go, let's start creating stuff?
Definitely the very first, just either Laurie House Anderson or Meg Cabot, because Meg Cabot's books I still have like all over my house, like my mom's house, and she gets irritated when she finds them. And Laurie House Anderson, I stole one of her books from a girl in school and never gave it back. But those are the two main authors who really made me want to write YA. And then Renee Watson is like such a big inspiration to me because she writes in pretty much every children's age category, and she always centers Black girls, and I love it so much. They might not be very, plot driven, but you're in this girl's head and it humanizes them, and I see myself in them in a way that I don't with so many books. And like the usual, like Becky Albertalli and Angie Thomas and Nick Stone. There's so many great authors. So great.
I mean, I kind of wondering if you could talk about that a little bit as well, like whether you felt, I feel like obligation isn't quite the word, because I think obligation makes it sound like it's work as opposed to something that's like can be joyous and exciting. Writing like Black girl characters, is that something that you immediately were like, well, I'm not gonna not do that, like that's clearly something I'm gonna do? And if so, like, was it thinking about the you who was reading these books and like needing to see those characters and really loved being able to have someone explore their lives? Was that always something that was conscious in your mind, or was it like not even a thought process and then later on people started asking you like, so why did you write about a Black teenage girl? And you're like, why not? Like, how was that balance for you?
I think that I had a lot of like, what's the word? Internalized racism issues when I was younger. And I mean, everyone has internalized racism, but specifically when I was younger and I first started writing, I remember writing a book about mermaids. It was really bad. And the main character was white. And one of my critique partners assumed the character was Black. And I was so upset. But as I got older, I realized, like, why would it be bad for the main character to be Black? Especially, this sounds kind of condescending or, I don't know, very intense. But reading Toni Morrison and just listening to her speak about her own writing also really inspired me, because she just did not center white people in any way. And it seemed like she never thought about them. Like, she was always writing about Black people. And if she was asked why you only write about Black people, don't you feel that's limiting? She was like, it's not limiting at all. You know, like, there's so much that I could write. And I think that really influenced my own writing and the way I look at creating anything.
I completely agree. From the, I feel like I've seen that argument quite a lot from all kinds of marginalized identities, where it will be treated like it's you're right, like a limit of why would you only write about Black protagonists? Why would you only write about queer stories? Why would you include disability in all your main characters? As if that somehow that's means that you can only have one experience, as opposed to opening up new possibilities. It's so interesting. Do you feel like that's something that you're going to do throughout your books? Does that feel like it's just natural to you that writing these stories?
Yeah, I especially Black girls, and especially Black queer girls, because I feel like Black girls and Black women get forgotten or ignored, even when we talk about like Black Lives Matter. And for example, recently, when we see the protests, a lot of times people are chanting a man's name, and they forget about people like women who have been killed, or they forget about trans people who have been killed, or they don't even know. And so that's really frustrating. And that's one of the reasons why I want to center Black girls in the stuff that I create.
Amazing. When you are writing and you're in that process, you're in there, do you find it useful to be consuming media at the same time? That might be, if you're writing in a particular genre, like making sure to read books in that genre at the same time, or do you need a lot of space between you and other people's work when you're in the middle of that writing process?
I try not to read something too close, but like, I'm writing a romance right now, and I've been reading romance novels, and I think it really helps get into the general like tone of the genre. When I wrote Off the Record, which is my second book, I just kept watching Almost Famous, which is what I kept comping it with. And for anyone who doesn't know, Almost Famous is, I think it came out in 2000 or 1999. And it's about a teen journalist who works for Rolling Stone. And I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. But I kept watching that. And especially when it comes to research, I'll read a lot when whatever field that I'm writing about.
Sense. I've just seen we've had another housekeeping question. How do you enter the giveaway? I think there's an issue with loading the description. Using the hashtag platform YA book club. Again, that's platform YA book club. Anywhere on social media, we are tracking you. We are searching for you on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We're looking everywhere, and we're basically picking one person who uses the hashtag each week. So if you have thoughts about the book, you can use the hashtag. If you have questions to ask the author for that week, you can use the hashtag. And then we'll just pick someone who's used it. That's essentially it. Pretty easy, hopefully. I'll just do another question from the live chat as well. This one is from Samantha, who asks, you mentioned writing screenplays. Would you want to write one for full disclosure, like Simon vs. the Homo sapiens agenda? I think it would make a great book to screen project.
Wow. Thank you. That's what I've been saying for a long time. No, it's interesting. So I go to school and I study film and TV. And my first year, the book hadn't come out yet, but I told one of my screenwriting professors, and he was like, "This is excellent. You should write an adaptation." So he actually scrapped the actual assignments. So he'd be like, "Everyone else will do this, and Camryn's going to work on adapting her book." And he would say this every class. So as you can assume, everyone grew to hate me. But I did outline and write like the first 30 pages. And I don't know if it was because like I had just finished editing or if just being an author makes me too close, but I found it really difficult. And usually when I write a screenplay, it's not anything that I've written. I think there's one book that I've written that I'd want to adapt, but that's because I can kind of see how to make it different. With full disclosure, I'd be like, there's nothing wrong with this. The whole thing should be in a screenplay. What are you talking about?
Do you feel like you'd be able to give it up to someone else and be like, yes, show me your vision on the screen? Or are you like, let me just hold on to it for a little bit longer?
It's weird because I do want to make movies and like screenwrite and direct, but I kind of want to do those with original ideas. And with the books, I'm really open to the idea of someone else adapting it, like if they're doing it in good faith, because I forget what someone said, but it's like a remix, right? Like it's not exactly what the book is, but it's someone's take on what the book should look like on screen. And I'd love to see how someone can change it or make it better or make a new vision.
There are so many cool visuals. I feel like there's a lot of cool visuals in this book. Obviously having the play within a play, which is like my absolute favorite like writing trope thing that can be included, because I think that's always what was I watching the other day? I don't know if you've ever seen the film Handsome Devil.
I don't think so.
It's like a Irish gay teen movie, and
awesome.
It's very like, oh, they're learning about this particular thing in their class, and it comes up in their real lives. Same with like Easy A and The Scarlet Letter. Like there's that thing, and I think it's always really, I just love that. I feel like it's so like neat in a package, and I can just see this amazing high school production of Rent and all the behind the scenes stuff that goes on, and like being in the wings. And I'm an artist. What
I get it.
Very interested in seeing it all come together. So if anyone has any questions for the live stream, I know there's a couple more that we haven't asked yet, but please keep putting them into the chat. I am going to ask one more question before we go into Spoiler Town. That is going to be the section of the live stream where we talk spoilers. So if you haven't finished watching yet, then listen to the answer to this next question and then pause, you finish reading the book, come back to this video later and finish this, because we don't want to give any spoilers. And as hinted earlier in the chat, there is a mystery element to this that we wouldn't want to get spoiled. So my last question before Spoiler Town is, you actually kind of talked about the plotting being something you struggle with, but I was wondering in general, what has been the biggest struggle for you as a writer? And also, how have you overcome that? Or do you feel like you've overcome it yet? Or are you still in the middle of whatever this difficulty is?
I think there's sort of the weird like seesaw thing between writing what you want to write and then writing something you know that will like sell. So a lot of times I want to write, for example, I talked about this earlier, this book based on Kylo Ren that probably will never see the light of day. And it's two boys and they basically spend the whole summer just kissing and talking about their feelings. And my agent was like, there's nothing happening in this. And I'm like, but they're kissing. And isn't that enough? But yeah, I think that's the struggle. And I think it's gotten a little easier as I've gotten older, but it's also weird when you have an idea and you're like, is this good enough? I have a friend who can't write anything like if she knows it's not going to sell. And I feel like that's really wise in terms of like business decisions. But then I'm like, oh, I'm also an artiste and I need to be free. So it's this weird like back and forth.
I mean, do you feel like you have a handle on that now? Do you feel like you've kind of come to terms with what you can/can't write that you know will sell? Or is that still quite tricky for you to try and work out and you've got to kind of figure it out with someone else's help at this point?
I try to add like a more commercial spin. And then, so like for me, in full disclosure, what's most important is the conversations about sex and the conversations about HIV and the romance. And I said this before, I kind of use like the Trojan horse of the mystery to get all the other stuff in. So that's what I've been trying to do, and I think it's working. So hopefully it continues to work.
Amazing. So, right, spoiler time. If you have not finished the book, please pause now. I will give you a second to pause because we don't want to spoil anything for you. Okay, right. So, I'm going to start with another question that someone else sent in. That was it was on the Discord, and they had to put the little spoiler blank over the question. So like, just in case someone's in this Discord and hasn't finished the book yet, did you know Jesse's motivations for the blackmail from the start? Was that always something? I know you mentioned earlier about him being a bit 2D at the beginning and you having to flesh him out. Did you always know what that motivation was, or did it kind of develop a few different ways first and then you figured out a little bit later?
Yeah, I knew the motivation because it sounds kind of silly, but like Miles is a play on like the golden boy next door who's great at sports, and he's usually white and blonde. So I was like, of course everyone's in love with him. It makes sense. What I was worried about was Jesse coming off as like this evil, gay, two-dimensional character. And what I ultimately came up with is that everyone in the book's gay, so it's okay that one of them is not great.
That's very true.
And I think that like what usually gets frustrating, at least for me, is if the only gay character in a book is dead or evil. If they're all gay, it's a little easier.
Yeah. To be fair, that is how it works. I think the problem with a lot of tropes is if there's only one person that is black or is gay or is trans or is disabled in a narrative, all of the expectations and the stereotypes are kind of relying on that one person trying to break them, and ultimately you kind of can't do it because there's always going to be conflicting stereotypes. The classic one is you've only got one woman on a team of superheroes, for example, hypothetically in the Marvel universe. If you have that character want to have kids, then you're making a statement about women wanting kids, and if that character really doesn't have kids, you make a statement about how women shouldn't want to have kids. And so it completely makes sense to me that will be part of the decision of actually we can avoid it being a like problematic or difficult trope by just having more gay people, and considering that everyone in your story is gay. It worked really well.
Thank you.
I think you mentioned this earlier, Jesse was always going to be the one who blackmailed, right? There was not. So
yeah.
When did the red herring stuff come in? Because I have it on record that I was like, Eric, you little, how good you Eric? And people in the Discord thought Claudia for a bit as well. There were like a lot of possibilities like all over the place for this, because it was, I think that decision to have it in Simone's point of view meant that we don't know how reliable she is as a narrator. We don't know what she isn't seeing behind the scenes. So all we know is her interpretation of like Eric not liking her or Jesse being really friendly. So when did you start placing those red herrings and kind of how did they come about?
Yeah, I didn't really do that until my agent was like, I know it's Jesse. And she's like, this must be fixed. So there was a bunch of red herrings that I went back and added. This is so bad. There's one girl whose name I don't even remember, who is kind of always hanging out with Eric, and she's also really mean. And so just all those people who are just kind of like suspicious, like this suspicious mystery music plays whenever they enter.
I have another spoiler question for you.
Okay.
Was there ever a point in the process of you writing this where you thought Miles and Simone would not stay together? Was there any point at which there was more drama between them, or were you like, you know what, this is going to be the solid thing, Simone is just going to have this boy who's great the whole way through, we're going to have the tiniest little bit when he doesn't like defend her immediately, but then it's going to kind of be fine because he's just plucking up the courage to stand up to his parents, and it's all fine afterwards. It's not him being an asshole. Was there ever a point at which you were like, oh, maybe it's not a happy ending between them, or were you like, no, this is going to be part of it the whole way through?
Yeah, I always wanted it to be a happy ending because, like I said earlier, a lot of the literature that I'd read about HIV and AIDS was really like sad and depressing. And again, not that that's bad, but I wanted to write sort of a new take on it. So I wanted her to have basically everything she wanted, and I wanted them to be together at the end.
Mm-mm. I love them so much. I was just like going through, I just like the absolute like vision, also just like speaking about the visuals of what it would look like. I picture when I read really strongly in my head, like I can see what's going on. I have like, there's the architecture of like the school hallway, everything is totally in there. And just the bit where she asks him out the very first time, and it's this excruciating, what probably is about like half a second before she's like, okay, goodbye forever, and then just like and you know that in real life, like in her head, it's like I waited for half an hour for him to respond, and he just looked at me like he hated me, and then I had to leave for my own dignity. And yeah. you know exactly what's happening in actual real life is that she literally just like panicked and then immediately left. And then him coming after her, like it was just these like swoon worthy moments. And I was so I was worried for like 2 seconds that Miles was not going to be who we thought he was. And I was like, no, Camryn wouldn't do that to us. She loved him too much for this. It was such a great romance between them, and I'm really interested in your process for that, for the love interest element, right? Because when you have a love interest who the whole way through it's going to be like a good guy, how do you get some kind of like complexity or personality or something with him? Like how did you try and find that complexity with Miles, so he wasn't just like this perfect angel who like descended and was like, hello, I'm here to take you.
I'm here to rescue you. Yeah, that was one of the things we had to work on in edits. Like I said before, he was white, and that wasn't what was wrong with him. But he was
white, so we had to scrap it. We had to
stop. Whenever I say this, I sound like so mean. I'm like, he was white, so it didn't work. But what really was happening is that he just was really perfect, and it made him really flat. Mm-hmm. And it just wasn't working, and it didn't feel, what's the word, exciting. Mm-hmm. So when I made him Black, it was a little easier for me because I could add like cultural stuff that they could bond over and stuff that I could see bothering him. So for example, like his parents won't let him play basketball because they say that it's too much of a stereotype. So he plays lacrosse, and on the team, it's pretty much all white boys and he's the only Black one. So that was an interesting way to add tension and also kind of create tension between Simone and Miles. Like Miles is like, I don't really care if the team's all white because they're my friends. And Simone's like, well, they're racist and they suck. And he's like, well, they're my friends. And it's sort of like a little fight, but I could see that happening, especially in high school.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think that, like we'd already kind of talked about, when people have existing knowledge or kind of common knowledge between them, they're not going to have a conversation which is for readers who don't have that knowledge. They're not going to be like, yes, now we must discuss the intricacies of our lives as Black teenagers so that you understand what we're talking about. And so it felt really exciting to have this dynamic between them where you had this tension of both of them ultimately making those decisions because of their Blackness, right? So like she's judging his friends on the fact that they're saying like racist stuff, but then he's also assessing his friendship with them based on this kind of wanting to not conform to stereotypes and having his parents really put that into him. So it was really exciting to be able to, you know, similarly to everyone being gay, have these conversations where it was, you allowed these two Black characters to have differing opinions on something. That felt really exciting to me, that it was that you just gave these really just realistically diverse voices, let's be real about it, like not tokenizing like, oh yes, we're gonna have one Black and we have one gay and we're gonna have one this, that you allowed them to like be complex and to argue with each other, and that exploration was really exciting to me because it kind of felt much more complex than the kind of writing that we maybe get when we assume that teenagers are these like blank white slates who need to have like diversity explained to them, and the reason why you would write a diverse YA book is to explain to teenagers about diversity. Like this felt like it was really much more about, okay, that's just, we're just in these people's world now, like that's how we're going to play it.
Yeah.
So really, really love that. Let's take another question from the live stream because I see that we have another one come in and I like this question. Farida asks, if you could have a tea party with any 3 writers, living or dead, who would it be and why?
I think this is my friend, which is funny.
Oh my God, I love
it's great.
Hey.
Hi. I'm going to tell her to watch Pride and Prejudice again. And Mr. Darcy is amazing and you don't have taste. Anyway.
Yes, call her out on this live stream.
There's tension. If I could have a tea party, I would want to, oh, this is hard. Okay, one of my favorite directors was named Lynn Shelton, and she just passed away like at the beginning of quarantine. And she was so, so cool. She made independent movies, and she actually inspired Ava DuVernay because Lynn Shelton basically scrapped up the money all by herself, and she made at least 9 features, I want to say, and she didn't let anyone tell her no. And she started doing this when she was older, like in her late 30s, and she was the head director on the miniseries Little Fires Everywhere. And she actually got nominated. I mean, she had passed away by then, but she was just so, so cool and was really a big inspiration for me. So I want to talk to her, and especially since she seems so nice. I also would want to talk to, oh, this is so hard. This is so hard. Why did she give me such a hard question?
Call her a friend, honestly. Look at this.
So Lynn Shelton, probably, what's her name? Minnie Riperton. I don't know if I'm saying it right. She's a Black like soul singer, and she's Maya Rudolph's mom. And she always wore like baby's breath in her hair, and her voice is just so beautiful. And I feel like she'd be so great to talk to, or she could just sing the whole time. And the third person would probably be Heath Ledger. Are these people are all dead? Oh, this is so morbid. Yeah, Heath Ledger, because I just loved him, and I'd be like, oh, I have a crush on you. But I'd also be like, I really admire your acting, and I'd want to know what roles he'd take today if he were still alive.
Are you like a cooking person? Would you be catering this meal, or would you be like, we're going to go out to a restaurant?
Yeah, we're going out, because if I cooked for them, I'd probably kill them all again, and it would be very sad.
Oh my God, amazing. I've just seen we have another question. I was like just looking at the time. I think we might have, if anyone has any more questions, put them in the chat now, because we are almost out of time, but I want to make sure that we get to the question if you have them. So Always Smiling asks, if you could meet one character from your book and be friends with them, who would it be and why?
I'd say Simone, but as I said earlier, she'd probably really judge me for my my lack of musical knowledge. I think she would end up going to my school. So I go to NYU, and I can see Simone coming here and like studying something having to do with musical theater. And I think she would just be super cool to hang out with. And I also feel like we could have like those Sex in the City sex talks that they are always having in every episode, and it would be fun.
Would you actually, that's kind of an interesting question. With Simone, would you be interested in writing something that follows her after Full Disclosure, or do you feel like her storyline is done and you can kind of imagine her at NYU, but you kind of feel like this is kind of a standalone thing?
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty standalone. I could write like a novella where she's kind of like in NYU suffering. No, not suffering, but like she's mad at the NYU administration for increasing tuition during a pandemic. But yeah, I can't really see like a whole other book. I feel like the story is sort of told, and I can imagine her in the real world, but not really like a new conflict.
I mean, that's another interesting question. We were talking a little bit earlier about YA books and kind of up modernizing and updating them as you go along, and like whether or not you need to be down with the kids to do them. Do you feel like you're going to be taking this pandemic and lockdown like into your writing? Do you feel like it's going to be a thing that ends up in there? Like, I've just realized that there's going to be a whole load of people that have to decide whether they're going to set their books in like an alternate universe of 2020 where this hasn't happened and everything's just kind of normal still. Like, is that something you've thought about, or are you like, let's not be thinking about that right now, Rowan, let's
Yeah, I tried to think about it. I had a screenwriting class like earlier in the year, and I remember it was set now, and they were like driving all over the world, or driving all over the country, and I was like, you know that like they can't really do this in the year 2020. And she was like, it'll be set in an alternate universe. And that's sort of me. Like, I don't want to acknowledge it, but someone will probably force me to.
Yeah, that's such a weird thing to think about, that might be part of. Anyway, I'm just going to double check there's not. Oh, we've had a question from Samantha Clark. Do you have a favorite musical? I also want to know the answer to this question.
A favorite musical? For a long time it was Hamilton, but I have like lots of discourse around Hamilton that we don't have time to get into. I also really love Les Mis, and this is something that Simone would beat me up for because I really love the film adaptation with Hugh Jackman. And I used to watch it so much and sing to it and annoy my mom. And Simone thinks that it's like trash and that it wasn't done well. So we would fight.
Oh my God, amazing. Have you seen both of them live, or are you like a...
I've seen Hamilton live. I have not seen Les Mis live. I've seen Hamilton Newsies like 12 times because my sister loved it
so much. I love Newsies more than I can possibly say.
I've seen it so much.
I've seen it live because I went to New York just as it went on tour, and it just crushed my soul. But on that trip, I did see Les Mis in New York live, and
that's awesome.
I mean, I don't want to spoil Les Mis for anyone, but there is a death scene on a bridge, and the way that they did that was I cheekily tried to find a bootleg of it afterwards just so I could show people that scene, because the way they do that death is unbelievable. Like everyone was like gasping in the theatre. It was so incredible, because there's obviously different ways you can stage stuff.
Yeah,
musicals, they're pretty much the same. Staging is really the big difference that you can make, and it was stunning, but no one apparently had secretly filmed it, so everyone was being very good in those theatres, but annoyingly it means I have to try and really excitedly explain to people about the staging of this musical, and I'm like, how interested are you actually in what's happening? I'm trying to describe to you when you cannot see what I'm seeing in my head, and it probably sounds so weird, but good musical choices, very good musical choices.
Thank you.
We have another question from Always Smiling. Do you have a favorite Disney movie? Are you a Disney person?
I think Disney is corrupt. However, I think it's a monopoly. But that being said, my favorite Disney movie, I was really into Aladdin before I realized that it was like low-key racist. And I probably would go back to Aladdin, yeah, because I just really liked the whole like Jasmine, my first feminist hero, Jasmine.
Did you, I mean, live action Aladdin, have you seen that one, or are you like...
No, I could rant, oh my God, Rowan, I could rant about this for so long. I just feel like the live action adaptations are just so unnecessary, and it's a way for them to make more money and not actually create anything new. But I mean, our evil mouse overlords will own everything. So
I think we're out of time, sadly. So I want to ask one more question.
Okay.
Let's segue really well. Oh, speaking of new things, creating new things, what are you working on at the moment? What's coming up for you now that Full Disclosure is very much out in the world and people are loving it? What's next?
Yeah, my second YA comes out in May of 2021. I forgot the exact day, but it's May, and it's called Off the Record, and it's about a teen journalist who goes on a film press tour and uncovers a sexual assault scandal, and I really, really love it. And I'm also trying to write a romance novel, which is kind of, I don't know what's going on with it, but I'm trying my best.
Oh my God, thank you so much for joining. And thank you everyone who was watching for your questions, they were great. Again, if you want to get involved in the book club, check everything out, will be in the description of this video, and this video is also going to stay up afterwards as a video on our channel, so if you didn't quite get to catch all of it, don't worry, it's not just live, it is sticking around. And then next week we are going to be reading Anna K by Jenny Lee, which is a modern retelling of Anna Karenina, with a Korean American protagonist. I'm very excited about it. Jenny, we are now Twitter friends, so she's been really excited about the book club. Now it's her week, so we're getting very pumped up for that. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me, Camryn. This was amazing. I
had so much fun.
Thanks. We met and chatted before for some videos for the channel, so I think we have 1 or 2 of your videos already on this channel. So if anyone is looking to hear more from Camryn, then have a little look search for her name basically on our channel and the videos come up. There was some really good stuff to do with that. And hopefully we'll see you guys next week. Okay, bye.